So operationalizing impact, I feel like this is your bag, and I think that it's interesting because when I think about the idea of operationalizing something, um, it puts me in the mind of embedding a thing in the operation. And as a person who is very much still philosophically an outsider inside the industry, that journey for you must have been a little crazy because you're trying to embed a philosophy and an idea into an operation that you're still very much learning about.
Yeah,
Something like,
it's. I'm glad you framed it this way because it's been a journey for me to even recognize like how steeped in tradition the operation side of the hotel and hospitality business is. A lot of people have been trained on how to do what they do every day, and it's proven to be successful in a lot of ways. And deviating from that impacts performance, or impacts the bottom line, impacts the experience for the customer. And it feels like in some ways that what we've been kind of looking to inject into the overall like experience and how things are done, it creates an element of discomfort for the people who have to execute it on our side. Of course, it's never meant to be passed on to the guests. They're meant to see it as something that connects with who they are and resonates with them. This is why they chose us over someone else. If they're privy to this information, if we've done a good job disseminating like our efforts to them and making that connection. But it shouldn't, if it's embedded properly within the organization, then it shouldn't feel like something that is grossly outside of what needs to be done and causing more of a disruption to their workload every day. Instead, we have to frame it and position this in a way that it shows value for them to do this. Ultimately, I believe that we need organizations as a whole to start to measure that, or say, this is a metric that we're going to judge our colleagues on, the people who are here to deliver the business. And if once that becomes like a big piece of it, then we'll all start to pay attention to it, right? Yeah. And as they say, if we're paying for it, we're going to pay attention to it.
I love this, man. I think that we have to stop framing disruption as negative.
Yeah.
Every movement is grounded in disruption. I think there's and like every philosophy, there's a full spectrum of ideas. Some of the ideas can be, a little more far-fetched, a little more progressive, a little more advanced. But some of these ideas are the sorts of things that you should be able to get behind in 5 minutes of conversation. Mm-hmm. And so talk a little bit about your thoughts on supplier diversity specifically.
This has been very important to me because I grew up with entrepreneurs around me. Right. And as we see, the absence of diversity within the supplier choice is more of a mutation than it is a natural part of the state of things. So I looked at the work that you introduced into the conversation as something that was righting the scales, balancing the kind of the business and putting it in a place where we can begin to do the things that were supposed to be done from the beginning. Right? Looking to the small business owners for that were within the local area, the region, to provide their products and their services. But since you have an entrepreneurial mindset and you understand how the industry works because of 20 plus years of experience, you were able to say, hey, like, we got to be more patient with this. We can't expect that all of our vendors are going to be the same. So this may require more attention than it needs, than the other ones have needed. But this is how we're going to do it together, and essentially prime the entire business so that all the other parts of the organization are able to do exactly that, to diversify it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think organically, and to the point previously made, we set out with a destination, but we didn't set out with a specific roadmap. And I think what we ended up doing in a really authentic way was we created a supplier ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just us buying from these suppliers. They started to support each other. And to your point, it was heavily local, heavily woman focused, heavily focused on people of color. And these are people who typically have been locked out of those opportunities. You don't see, or you didn't previously see, a ton of support of local businesses as a natural organic state for a lot of industries like ours, because we could source things from farther away for cheaper and exponentially cheaper. But cheaper isn't always better. And even if you have a slim margin or a slim tolerance for paying a little more, let's call it 5%, for something that's local, for something that's from a community that's historically been marginalized, you have to believe that the 5% comes back plus some from the environment because of what you've curated and because of the positive impact that has on your reputation. It leads to positive outcomes for the business.
Yeah, and you made an excellent point. Like, if the organization is familiar or used to buying products from a larger supplier, then their economy to scale is going to be different than a local provider.
Right.
And we can't have the same expectations on them, and we have to adjust our systems in order to interact with them. So an example would be payment terms. It can't be net 30, net 60, net 90. Cash flow for that small business is much different than it is those larger organizations like Scott's Tissue. You know, not to name them in a bad way, but this is one of the vendors that we would normally purchase toilet paper from.
Or any toilet paper company.
Or any toilet paper company. So, you know, we had to adjust, you know, how we do business in order to make space for whatever supplier we wanted to choose.
Yeah, I think the lower tissue example, which we get into, we talk about quite a bit, is it so beautifully captures the journey of exploration on our part, but it wasn't just exploration; it was sort of exploration with intention. I think the other interesting thing to call out is that you entered the environment as an entrepreneur. Your first engagement with hotels was as a consultant. And I think another meaningful thing to call out about the current environment is more and more roles that were embedded in the org chart as employees and colleagues are now being filled by consultants, because it's more efficient, because we're finding that the best talent in many cases exists outside of that traditional framework. And so as that happens, going back to the point of people voting with their dollars and people voting with their labor and people voting with their influence, one of the beautiful things about being a consultant is that you can fire customers.
Yeah.
And you can say, I only need 5 customers in order to get to where I want to get to from a financial perspective. I'm going to work with the 5 customers that are best aligned with my values, that are best aligned with my ways of working, which in some cases, payment terms, right? Yeah. You're not going to pay the best DJs in most cities 30 days after they play for you. Yeah. They're just not. And anybody who's going to accept that, typically in many cases, are not people who are in that space from a talent and attraction perspective. So you're limiting your ability to leverage that talent to drive economic outcomes for the business. And in many cases, what happens is people give up on the idea of having a DJ in the space because it didn't produce the financial returns that we wanted. But you would have had to have understood, and these are the things that, you know, you're uniquely positioned to be able to understand, that we're limiting our ability to have access to the DJs that would help us get to the outcome. So it's not having a DJ, it's having the DJ that you're going to be required to move a little bit differently. And there's things that are easy for us, really hard for the person on the other side of the transaction. And so if adjusting our payment terms is a meaningful thing, easy for us, hard for them.
Yep.
Right. And so I think there's 1,000 decisions a day that are made from a lens of, this is what it means for you to interact with industry X. And I think if industry X is now compelled by its workforce and by its consumer base to be more flexible, to get to the outcomes that they want, then I think this is a meaningful way to get there.
So we've discussed a lot around the consumer kind of impacting the industry and our behavior. And this is ultimately making me believe, and, you know, maybe the reader and the viewer of this, as they go through the chapters, understand that they have to learn the core behaviors and the ways that the business is supposed to be run, but also be flexible enough to adjust to the customer's needs, to the vendor's needs, to the needs of the market. So, ideally, this should set them up for success.
Sure.